Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Legaltech Week for October 9th, 2020. This is Bob Ambrogi. I am the author of the blog LawSites and the host of the podcast LawNext. I have to stop and think for a minute. Who am I? And what do I do? This is our weekly roundtable of legal tech journalists talking about the top stories of the week. We have a special guest this week who we'll get to in just a moment. But first, let's go around and introduce this week's panelists. Caroline Hill, welcome back. You've been gone for a while.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very errant. Thank you, Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, based in the UK, but our audience is global. And yeah, I've been running around having an actual Friday evening for the last couple of weeks. It's nice to be back, though.
Well, we're glad you can shelter in place and have your Friday evening with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And Victoria.
Hey, everyone. My name is Victoria Hudgins. I'm a reporter with Legal Tech News, where I cover law, technology, and the intersection of law and technology. You may have also seen my byline on law.com, The American Lawyer, Corporate Counsel, and other ALM publications.
We've seen it everywhere.
Definitely.
Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I'm an assistant managing editor with the ABA Journal. I handle the business of law section, which also looks at a lot of technology. My standard disclaimer is I don't speak for myself. Actually, that's not my standard disclaimer. My disclaimer is I do not speak for the ABA or for the ABA Journal. And some days I don't even speak for myself. And if a fly lands on my head during the middle of this, I do not speak for the fly either.
But so you have to have this color hair to make the fly stand out. Nobody would notice if a fly landed on your head.
Yeah, actually, it'd have to be on my face or something. But I would hope that I would notice it at that point. But
yeah, Joe.
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the podcast Thinking Like a Lawyer, I suppose. Just happy to have made it through yet another one of these weeks. That's about all. I really have nothing particularly eventful to talk about. It's kind of sad.
Okay. And Molly, how about you?
I'm Molly McDonough. I'm a legal affairs journalist and consultant based in the Chicago area, and happy to be here. And
for those of you watching on the Zoom webinar, go ahead and engage with us in the chat. If you have questions or comments or whatever, please let us know. And very happy to introduce our special guest today, Nicole Bradick. Hi, Nicole.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, especially on fairly short notice. So Nicole,
I'm always here for you, Bob.
It was Molly's idea.
I'm always here for Molly when she is at a loss of what to do. So she says, "Oh, let's pick up Nicole."
That's kind of how it went down. No, it's not at all.
It's cool, Molly. It's fine.
So Nicole, why don't you start by just telling people who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Nicole Bradick. Joe, why are you looking at me like that? You're giving me a weird look, Joe. My name is Nicole Bradick. I'm the CEO of a company called Theory and Principle. We are a software design and development firm that works just in legal space. So we work with clients across the legal industry to build custom digital products.
Good. And so you do lots of stuff, but the reason we thought it would be good to have you on here today is that you've actually got a couple of announcements this week, but one is you rolled out, I guess actually last week, you rolled out this really cool new website that's highly relevant to what's going on in the world right now. So why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So we worked with an amazing voting rights organization called Spread the Vote. Typically, Spread the Vote is focused on getting people identification during normal voting times, but they pivoted a little here due to this situation that we're facing. And so they recognize the fact that I think in the primaries, about more than 500,000 mail-in ballots were thrown out because people just didn't read the directions. They didn't sign in the right place. They didn't put one stupid envelope in another stupid envelope. They didn't do all of the big hurdles and things that they're required to do and that are different and that are constantly changing. We also, the data showed that young voters were 5 times more likely to have their ballots thrown out. So this product, it's called Read the Effing Directions, and the URL is readtheeffingdirections.com. The product is designed
And it's effing, not.
It's F. Read the Fing directions is actually the domain. Read the Fing directions. Yeah, we actually had issues with that because one of our developers put effing, EFF. No, it's just Fing. So that it's designed to give you like state by state a sense of what you need to do, and we're keeping it up to date every day as new Supreme Court rulings are coming out, as new rules are being erected and put in people's way every dang day. And so the goal of the product was to make it like super shareable. So we're hoping people will share it on social media, make sure all their friends, if you are in a state on the app, if you go to like Maine, which is where I am, you can text it to your friends, you can do it on Twitter, and it'll say, tell your Maine friends not to F this up, and then it'll send people directly to the main portion. So there's some really cool videos on there too that I would highly recommend you check out. On the landing screen, there is a animation that some volunteer animators put together that's awesome, with music written by Bela Fleck, for those of you who are bluegrass fans. He wrote it and donated it just for this. And then if you click into his state, you'll see a video by a bunch of great comedians, where if you are into like late night comedy, you'll recognize a ton of them. So
you've graded the states by difficulty and ease, is that right? So Alabama, pretty effing difficult.
Yes.
But if you're voting in Alaska, it's easy peasy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
Just wrap your ballot in a salmon and send it in from there.
And then there's an interim level too. I forget what we called that, but yeah, Alabama. Like, who's surprised? Alabama is pretty effing difficult.
I like your list of instructions. So sign the envelope. If you're a loaner type, you can sign it in front of a notary.
Yeah, so all the content came from Spread the Vote, and they did an awesome job. It's very good content.
Put a stamp on it. I like that. It's important.
Yeah.
You could put a link to. Did you see Barack Obama did a similar sort of "this is how you vote"? There's a lot of focus on this. You should put a link to that video. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that was good. And then just recently, a bunch of comedians like Sarah Silverman and I forget who else was on there. They did a thing where they were all naked and were talking about the naked envelope, which is the stupid envelope that needs to go in the stupid envelope. That was pretty funny too.
I saw that. So
it's a major problem.
Did you guys have a lot of conversation about the name?
So we, on our team, we immediately found the URL don'tfuckupyourballot.com, but Spread the Vote had read the effing directions, and they were ready to go with it. So no, there was not discussion.
I like it a lot. Any opportunity to use the F word.
I saw Adriana Linares is on the chat. She always gets upset when I curse, so I won't curse Adriana.
Adriana does?
Yeah, she gets really upset when I curse or when I have any sort of potty mouth. We had a meeting once, like I forget what it was, and we came out of the meeting and she was like, "I can't believe you made it that whole meeting without saying a curse word." I was like, I am capable of this.
My only disappointment, I didn't get to write it in full. Just had to write it.
So for the conference attendees, Adriana has already weighed in with Nicole has the worst potty mouth in legal. So, yeah.
I'll take it.
So any other questions or comments or thoughts about this?
Yeah, I had a question for you, Nicole. So just while you were looking at all the various states and whatnot, and what the regulations were, and what were some things. What are some things that you were able to extrapolate, and from every state or most of the states, and just what are some things that voters should be careful of when they're filling out their ballot?
Yeah, certainly signatures. Location of signatures is really important. So there are places where you have to sign outside the envelope, and if you don't, they're throwing it right away. So location of signatures is really important. The witness requirement. A lot of states have a witness requirement, which can be a notary, which in a pandemic is absolutely ridiculous. So that I would pay attention to. And we've also seen a lot of issues right now. I think it's also kind of been in the news too. I think, Victoria, especially in Philadelphia, there's been an issue of the ballots in ballots, the double ballot. People mess up the double ballot a lot. So those seem to be the biggest sticky issues for sure.
And Nicole, I was wondering, like, what was the process like of putting together the data and letting people know, especially as like the courts are kind of making these decisions, how to like keep that updated? What was that process like?
So Spread the Vote put the data together. So that was all the content was their work. And we're sort of keeping in communication every day. Every time there's, like this morning, I heard about the Supreme Court decision in Wisconsin. So I wrote them and said, do we need to do anything? And, you know, we're sort of keeping day to day in contact to determine if we need to update anything on the site. You know, last thing we want to do is give somebody the wrong information.
How did
what's
Theory
the
get
traction?
involved, and how long did it take you to do it?
So this was actually a super fast project for us. I met Kat Calvin, the executive director and founder of Spread the Vote, at like the very end of August. And so I think our team built it in like 3 weeks or something like that. It was pretty speedy.
That's fantastic. That's great.
That's pretty impressive. I'm curious about you. You have a lot of kind of high profile elements to this. You know, what's been the traction? One of the things that I said to you earlier before this call is that I sent this to my son after Nicole posted, and it was a few hours later, and he was like, oh, I already got that from my friend. I'm like, really? That's amazing.
Awesome. That's cool.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I think Spread the Vote does a lot is they leverage a lot of celebrities to spread the news. So like some of, what's his name? James Gaffigan tweeted about it, Jim Gaffigan. And like, so they definitely are leveraging a lot of high profile people to share it. So it's definitely getting, the videos especially are moving around a lot on social media, and the traffic has been really good. So hopefully it's helpful. We said in the beginning as a team, you know, if we can make 100 people have their vote actually count, we'd feel good about the job we did here. So I think we're certainly going to hopefully hit that.
There's obviously been a lot from Trump about trying to discourage. It seems, obviously I'm a bit of, excuse my dog, I'm a bit of an outsider, but have you seen, are you sort of in touch with the impact that's having?
Not really. Not personally. I mean, from a personal level, I just did a training to be an observer here in Maine, a poll observer, and there is a lot of concern about intimidation and sort of making sure that you're on top of that and reporting the right things to the right people. So, not related to that product, but related like personally, people do seem to be quite concerned.
Yeah. Oh, well done. It looks fab. It's very clean, sort of very simple. It looks, yeah.
That's our jam. That's what we do.
Have you done this before?
Well, so you're going straight from this to a civic legal tech collaboration or a conference that you're pulling together. Is this something you're doing or leading? Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and what you're seeing in this space? I mean, I've talked to you in the past about, you know, your efforts, and a lot of what we've talked about is that adoption is partly so low, at least from your perspective, because design is not user friendly, which is where, you know, you guys come in and really make things easy to use. And this, I can say, is very easy to use. It's fun to use, which makes a difference too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's always our goal, is to make really crappy things enjoyable. So yeah, we're actually trying to solve for a slightly different problem with the conference we're having. So on October 21st, we are hosting sort of an online gathering. I'm not calling it a conference because it's not. But the goal is, so right now there are a number of groups who are focused on using technology and design to improve justice systems. But those groups don't talk. For example, you know, the sort of legal tech world. I think there are conferences, we all go to those conferences, we know each other. But then there's a whole civic tech universe, like Code for America and, you know, US Digital Services, a universe of really good designers and developers who are working on solving government tech problems. And so often our problems are overlapping. Like Code for America has a big record clearing project going on right now, and like 100 people in legal tech are building record clearing type products. So the goal is to bring those communities together. And there's gonna be I'm gonna do a really short overview for the civic tech people on like, here's what's happening in legal tech. These are the kind of things we're solving. This is kind of how we're solving it. And then Sid Harrell, who is an amazing designer who's been in civic tech her whole life. Not her whole life. She was not a civic tech when she was a baby. But she's literally written the book on civic technology. She will do a thing on GovTech, and we're also currently working on getting somebody to talk about how tech is being used to support rule of law and justice systems in the developing world too, because again, I think there's probably a lot of overlap. And so it'll be a couple of tiny talks, and then we're using this platform called Remo, which like, there are all these virtual tables, and you just they'll have different topics. Like one will be juvenile justice, one will be, evictions, and you can pop into those tables and meet new people and talk to new people. So it's really just trying to like create this cross-pollination so that we're not duplicating efforts among the communities, so that we're not, so people are talking and learning from each other. And, we had space for 200 people. After 24 hours of announcing it, we are half full. And the best part is that like, I only know personally, like 15, 20% of the people who are listed, which makes me very happy. It means that, we're being successful in bringing new people in and getting new people to talk.
But of course, obviously, Nikki's not here, so I'll do the question for her. But do you have avatars when you're in these conversations?
That's exactly what went into my mind. Exactly. Nicole, you will not appreciate the significance, but that is exactly the first thing I thought was, do you have, you don't know how important this question is. Do you have avatars?
I don't think I fully appreciate the importance, but no, when you go into the table, you go into a video conference with 6 people, up to 6 people. So it's all video, sorry. You do have like a little like bubble with your face on it. So when people are poking around and seeing who's in each table, they can see the bubble.
So Nikki Black, who's normally on the panel with us, has got this mini obsession with developing a conference or using a platform with avatars. She particularly really has this sort of lovely fascination about avatars. We've talked quite a lot.
Yeah, I uploaded my profile photo, which is one a friend made of me. That's my head with, do you remember the laser beam background from when you were a kid and getting your school pictures? I have the laser beam background beside me, which I really enjoy.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I don't think they had cameras when I was a kid.
I found
getting your school daguerreotypes or
Oh, I love Bob So Old jokes. Great fun.
Great. What else? Any other questions or comments or thoughts about it?
We have 3 other products rolling out this month, so we're quite busy.
What are they?
Well, you'll have to wait and find out.
All right.
So Nicole, just for the benefit, actually for the benefit of the group. So we talked about GPT-3 a while back, and actually Nicole was one of the only people that when I first started writing about it, that was actually playing around with it. Just FYI, it was kind of a bit lucky because I just reached out to you, saying, "Do you know anything about GPT-3?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm actually like using it, trialing it," and actually it's quite limited.
Yeah, we got into the early testing group, but to be honest, since that sort of big hubbub at that time when you and I had the conversation, everybody was talking about it, we haven't even looked back at it again. Like I think like I told you, there's a lot. It's obviously very powerful and there's a lot of potential, but for the work that we're doing, it may be at some point we'll have a project that really lines up with what it's good at, but we don't have anything like right now.
Did you see it's been licensed exclusively by Microsoft? So OpenAI is not so open because it's exclusively licensed.
I didn't
to Microsoft.
See that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it could be really. Sorry, Bob.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
It could be really good for the legal profession actually, because bearing in mind how much we love Microsoft and use Microsoft, it'd be interesting to see what they do with that. And obviously Microsoft was one of the big. They invested $1 billion. They were, from the very outset, they were one of the big players. But it kind of goes in the face of this idea that it was open, but for the benefit of humanity. They're still going to have it's not quite clear. They still say that you're going to be able to take advantage of open APIs, etc. But it's an exclusive license with Microsoft, so the whole thing doesn't really make sense just yet. But yeah, anyway, that's what it is. So it could be quite beneficial for lawyers, I think, ultimately.
I just want to point out to Nick that I, in fact, did have my Habibi shirt on yesterday. So if you watch This Week in Legal Blogging, you will see that I had my shirt on.
Yes.
Or couldn't wear it today. And we're all waiting for Nicole to get the shirt site back up because, as I've told her, I have people in my community stopping me saying, "Where can I get one of those shirts? I want one of those shirts."
The Lebanese community of Gloucester is banging down his door.
Huge Lebanese. I have made friends with all 3 Lebanese people in Gloucester, and they're knocking at my door on a regular basis saying, "When can I get my T-shirt?" No, apparently there's actually there's a few Lebanese people here in Gloucester. They want shirts.
They're everywhere. We're everywhere. And they want shirts. Yeah, that was amazing. I have to say, like, this community really, I was overwhelmed by everybody's support of that fundraiser. Yeah. It was not what I was expecting.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on to talk about some of the other stories from the week, and you are welcome to stay here or welcome to leave and go do all this important work you do. And
I don't do any of it. My team is great.
No, it really is great that you did that. It really is. It's a great thing, and congratulations to you and your company and everybody involved.
Thanks so much, and we hope people will join us for the event in a couple weeks. It's completely free, of course. So, I think the link's in the chat.
I'll post. Yeah, have you posted the link to it in the chat already?
Yeah.
Oh, well done. Yep. Brilliant. Okay. Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Hey, thank you. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me. Talk later. Bye.
Later,
bye. All right. Moving on to other topics. It did just kind of remind me of her talking about the event. Reminded me that last week we were kind of talking about, or one of the things we were talking about all the virtual conferences, and I was mentioning a sort of concept of the pop-up conference. The Caroline Elephant and Gina Belisle have recently done their lawyer mom owner summit. Nicole is now doing this, but at the same time, the flood of other conferences goes on unabated. It's just, I mean, this week there was Net Documents had its Elevate conference. Today and yesterday was the College of Law Practice Management does their annual conference, which I just couldn't even register for because I just didn't have time to get to any of that. Next week is the Clio conference. The Legal Geeks conference is coming up, next week or the week after? A constant flood of conferences. I did write about the Clio, and they gave me a preview of their platform, and I will say I was really impressed with it. It's not something they developed; it's an off-the-shelf platform. But what I really liked about it was the first one I've seen so far that really kind of puts the emphasis on the attendee, almost on an equal footing with the speakers. I mean, each, like I wrote about it, each attendee kind of gets their own profile page, and you can add a little video greeting. And from your profile page, you can go in and, text and message other people and attendees. And you can very easily set up these little pop-up discussion rooms. You can either schedule them or just spontaneously create these little discussion rooms. And you can either invite people to them, or you can open them up by interest. When you register for the conference, you sort of pick some interests things you're interested in following during the conference, or you can change that during the conference. But the challenge of all these conferences keeps being how to get the users engaged in the way they would be at a live conference. And going to be interested to see how this works out next week. I'm looking forward to that.
I don't think they are still, there's a lot of effort going in, but I think that they just aren't getting engagement. And actually a lot of vendors I speak to are just not getting much out of I hate to be negative about it, but the fact is that I know people are trying really hard, and and it's not criticism, it's very difficult, but I still feel that for the vendors it's just not, they're just a lot. So one conference I was speaking to a vendor who would normally be there in force and didn't log on, like I don't know. I think that it's a big challenge. That platform that you're talking about sounds really interesting, Bob. And at Legal Geek, actually, so Legal Geek is next week, which is such a shame that it's had to go virtual, because obviously normally there's thousands of people in London for that, and although the content is great, you know, a lot of it is it's really about the networking. You just can't replicate it, but Jimmy Vesterberg has made it free to register just for the content, and also you can do some of the social networking stuff. It's Tuesday, Wednesday next week, and then it's just £60 if you want to. Then the extra just gives you means that you can access the content after the event. So the kind of free packages, it's all just live, and you know, you can catch whatever you catch. But what was quite interesting, when you register, there's an option to click on some of the key sponsors. I think they're just sponsors, but anyway, you can click, not just so I think they must be sponsors. Places like Barclays, Eagle Labs, and all sorts. You can click on who you want your details to be shared with as a kind of, you know, introductory, and I know most of them, I still click them all, obviously. But there's sort of little touches like that. I thought that was pretty good, you know, trying to connect people. And I know obviously a lot of them are trying to make these spaces, but I don't know if anybody else thinks I'm being particularly pessimistic, but I'm struggling with them.
So I mean, there's a difference too between, you know, some of these larger conferences with a lot of vendors and Clio Cloud, which is, you know, mostly a user conference, but they do have a lot of partners that they're promoting too. So I think the expectations are really high for Clio to see, you know, how they change this game. To Bob's earlier point, the flood is overwhelming. And now that there's no excuse not to go, you know, how choosy are you supposed to be? I mean, Legal Week year now seems completely overwhelming for me, even though I am excited that, you know, the cost barriers are down and, you know, there are lots of opportunities to connect. You know, I'm going to have to see some good justifications now for taking time to devote to a lot of these conferences. I mean, some people go to these all the time. They're just on a conference circuit, but now that they're all year, all the time,
yeah.
How are we supposed to pick?
Yeah. Well, and some of us do still have, day jobs and things to do during the day. It's like, it gets overwhelming. I mean, the Clio is doing their conference every day for like a 5-hour span. It starts at 11 East Coast time, I think, with the idea that it'll give people mornings or some time during the day to get other stuff done. But at the same time, they're stretching it out over 4 days, as opposed to the typical 2 days for that conference. So, if you really want to attend that's pretty much eating up most of the week next week. And that's
like TechShow is doing something similar where it's like, they're going to start later in the day to accommodate the West Coast folks, people, from other places, from, not the East Coast or Central. And then it's going to be, but they're going to have more days. So yeah, that's the other thing. It's kind of, how can you go to all these conferences now where there's going to be so much, like it eats up like 4 or 5 days at a time instead of just 2. And, there's one after another, and then it's just very easy to just get overwhelmed or just be like, all right, well, you know what? I'm just not going to go to any of them because it's just going to be too much. And there's no way I'm going to be able to absorb everything. There's no way I'm going to be able to pay attention all the time. So I'll just, read about it afterward, and then whatever I take from it, I take from it. But I think with Clio, it's going to be especially difficult for them because their conference has relied so heavily on people being there and having fun. And I mean, that was always a part of the best party conference. I mean,
right.
They have a hangover table every year, so at least they don't have to do that now. They're not going to have to go to Costco and load up on breath mints and 5-hour energy drinks and whatnot. So at least they can save some money that way, I guess. But yeah, it'll be interesting because they've relied so heavily on that social aspect, like that conference, especially considering compared to other ones. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can still kind of they're not going to be able to replicate that, obviously, but what they're going to do to try to compensate for that.
Yeah.
I think they already sent me a crate of Alka-Seltzer. So they're trying to make the experience the same.
They're going to have a virtual DJ party with Questlove. I mean, you can see all these lawyers watching virtually in front of Zoom, up dancing. I don't know.
Oh, there's going to be.
Do you have drinking bingo games? What are your drinking games for these virtual conferences? There's no bar now for, opening the bar during the conference.
Yeah. Sort of like debates.
There really wasn't.
Not that I'm
before.
advocating for that.
There wasn't a bar on that before. But the DJ, they've got Iron Chef coming. It's gonna be it's gonna be a thing.
I do kind of wonder if we'll get into like conference fatigue because we don't have in-person conferences, I think the spacing and the scheduling of them have changed, and now they're like in the same week or just the week after, and it's kind of putting a little bit of pressure of like, will I participate, especially when the networking still isn't there and no one's been able to replicate that type of networking from going from in-person to virtual. So it's kind of interesting to see, like I see a lot more of them, these conferences being scheduled close together. I'm thinking like, is that like fatigue where you're just like, I'm clicking into another Zoom video or whatever platform that they have. And it's just kind of like, it might end up that you maybe get less traction, like Caroline was saying about the vendors. I could see that becoming a thing and kind of like what's separating us from at the end of the day, you're just looking at your screen.
Yeah.
Does anyone know if, I know of one vendor, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the same thing though, Caroline, about that. I'm hearing a ton from the vendors about how they're not getting the traction. People aren't coming to the special rooms. They're not getting the leads they were able to get before. In person was much easier to get a legit lead that you could evaluate the person than, just an email address. And so I do think that's going to be a big issue. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to rethink why we have conferences and what they're for, and what we get out of them. I mean, practical skills or introduction to a vendor community. Those are two very different things, and a lot of conferences try to do all at once.
Yeah. Does anyone know of any vendors that have not gone ahead with, I know of one vendor that's not gone ahead with a conference because they know that it's not going to be what they want it to be. I wonder if people will just carry on, regardless. And we're just going to have this onslaught, as you said, or else if eventually people will just go, do you know what, until we can do it in person, actually we've decided it's not worth it. It'd be interesting to see whether that happens more.
I haven't heard of that, but I've heard of vendors participating in conferences and then saying after the fact, unless something changes, I'm not back, the next time you do it, if you have to do it this way again.
Yeah.
But
there's someone in the comments, so it might be worth reading the chat. Sorry. So someone said, I spoke, that's Molly.
Who is this Molly person who keeps coming?
So Dan, hi Dan. We passed on ILTA this year. I mean, Bob and I did 3 hours of live presenting at ILTA, which was pretty challenging, but that kept me in touch with the content for sure. I'm sure it did you too, Bob.
Well, that too, but then
and I can't say who, but I've definitely heard from vendors who are taking passes. But a lot of others are in for this first round just to see what happens with new technologies.
Yeah, Nick, thanks. So it's very similar to app fatigue, too many apps, too many conferences. I think I know I've spoken to quite a lot of people that just don't log on anymore.
All right. Well, let's move on to a couple more stories. I think we all agreed that it was not like a killer week for news happening, or if it was, they didn't tell us about it.
Not in our segment. It was a pretty big week for news generally.
Why, is there something going on in the world? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but our niche didn't quite get as much attention.
That's true. Victoria, you were going to talk about a story that you didn't write, but that was on law.com about a study involving law firms and sort of ALSPs, right?
Yeah, definitely. My colleague Dan Packel at the American Lawyer, he wrote about a report that Barretts and Brunel released earlier this week about law firms' captive alternative legal service providers, pretty much a alternative legal service provider that's like a subsidiary of a law firm. And they found like 47. And they said for the most part, like these ALSPs, they provide like e-discovery work, which is really kind of like the most common type of work that you find with like ALSPs. Well, the first market that they go into for ALSPs, because it's usually like high volume, a little bit like low risk, and most corporate legal departments, they'll turn to you for that type of services. But Barris and Brunel found that more global law firms are also venturing into more like sophisticated type of work with their ALSPs, and that includes like contract review, lease abstraction, and M&A due diligence work. And they were saying why you see that more often in global firms, because outside of the US, the alternative business service licenses and the Big Four, they put more pressure on law firms when they're international. They put more pressure on they could possibly take some corporate legal work from them. So Barris and Brunel think we'll start to see that in the United States. And the report kind of reminded me of an article that I wrote back in August, where I spoke to law firms, captive ALSPs, and it was interesting. He talked about sometimes they are more expensive compared to like your common ALSPs that aren't affiliated with a law firm, but they said most corporate legal departments, they're okay with that higher price because they come affiliated with a law firm. And if anything, they could take like their legal matter to a law firm that has a captive ALSP, so they can do the large scale document review and provide the legal expertise. So I could see it becoming something more that some law firms say like, hey, we're going to take the initiative and we're really going to say like, we're going to provide more services and not lose out some work to ALSPs. So I think it's an emerging market, and ALM, we're definitely covering it a lot.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because one of the things that I'm fully appreciating now is a number of services a firm or a company is signing up for. So the fewer integrations they have to do and trainings. So I can see the attraction to having kind of a one-stop shop for some of these, as long as you're seeing efficiencies and lower costs some way.
Yeah.
We did a webinar this week, which I seem to spend my life doing right now, but it was great actually. So we did it with Gravity Stack, Reed Smith's ALSP, and we did it with a company called Lionbridge, which does machine translation, and they've created a new app where they do to create precisely as to what you were saying, Molly, about completely integrated service, either with AI for contracts, or they've created a I forget what they call it, relativity machine translation or something like that. This app, and the interesting point that they made is, so they've got the contract, they've got the routine, the automated, and then they've also got the Reed Smith, they bring in the lawyers in as well, right? So actually, sorry, Victoria, that was you saying that. So they sort of creating this holistic partnership, which is as an integrated offering, which is obviously saves time. There's a inbuilt workflow element of it where you can see exactly where stuff is. It was pretty cool.
Are the captive ALSPs that were being talked about in this article, or in the survey rather, ones in which the firm is then actually selling those services to other firms, so that if they have, say, an e-discovery review in-house department, are they selling those review services to other law firms, or is it just for the lawyers and the legal professionals in that firm?
Oh, from the, I didn't get a chance to read the survey, but from the article, they didn't mention about if it's just like services that law firms could also sell to other law firms. But when I wrote my article in August about like law firms captive ALSPs, they did say that they do have, they sometimes do work with law firms. It's not common. Usually like their client is a corporate legal department, but one law firm, I think it was Troutman, Pepper, Hamilton, Sanders. They said like they've had like a small law firm reach out to them that said like, hey, we have this legal matter. It involves a lot of document review, large scale. Could we turn to you guys for help for reviewing those documents for our clients? So I think law firms are probably open for that. Of course, you have to, I guess, check for like any client conflicts, but I don't think law firms are against like working with other law firms and providing those services.
I think
I know that was something that was happening. Go ahead.
No, Dan did mention something about how that was just, it's not very well known outside of the lawyers from that firm.
Yeah.
But I do think, and Bob, you and I have had these conversations about the marketplace and, how this is expanding and how this is being documented and cataloged. It's that infrastructure is not there yet.
Yeah. There was, a couple of years ago, there were a lot, so this happened with law firms that were doing e-discovery. Several law firms that were sort of really specializing in doing e-discovery would start to build out their own kind of review team in-house, and then at some point would a couple of law firms did this. They would spin it off into a separate entity and then offer those same review services to other law firms. And there were a couple of firms that had some, I think, modest success with doing that. I don't know the current state of those. I haven't looked at that in a while, but that was a thing a couple of years ago.
The issue is with the cost, isn't it? I think we might have talked about this before. So what fascinates me is how well Herbert Smith Freehills has done in terms of having for such a long time, having their own internal, they call it alt, and having their own like ALSP very much within the body of the firm. And I think that my understanding is that why that works is that they have been able to ring fence it from a cost perspective, because I think the trouble is that often if you have tried to do alternative stuff within the firm, that actually you get you get forced to go down the same fee model, and that doesn't work because obviously it's supposed to be lower cost. So there's a lot, I think the economics have to make the economics work somehow.
Yeah. Caroline, what's new from the UK this week?
So mine's all about the product, actually. So like you, Bob, I haven't had any sort of major. It's been a fairly quiet week, but some interesting product stuff. So like you, I wrote about LexisNexis new market standards offering, which is pretty cool. I spoke to and I interviewed Daniel Lewis, who's formerly he founded Ravel, and he's now working on this similar sort of concept to the way that what they've done with litigation in terms of the analytics and being able to sort of strip it down and work out what sort of what deals have been done by what, and really sort of like doing a deep dive. So they're using public data, which is from SEC filings, and then they're doing they're enriching it. So in the way that they do in the litigation space with PACER, where they've got the human element working alongside the machine learning. So they're making sure that it's accurate and they're building it up. And then and lawyers can compare transactions, look at termination fees, triggers, carve-outs, and what's interesting. So I spoke to Daniel today on camera. That'll be out next week, and I said, do you think this, because obviously within the litigation space the stuff that they're doing with Lex Machina is now being used by clients potentially in panel reviews and just as you're in the selection process of how they're going to instruct lawyers, which is interesting. And I said, do you think that this tool that they've now launched, Market Standards, which is going to be built up beyond M&A, that this is the first installment, do you think that will be the same? Do you think? And he's I suppose he's going to say this, but he said that he thinks that there are already clients suggesting that they're going to be using it in the same way, so that there'll be this competitive advantage, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really interesting about that product is that it's part of what LexisNexis calls its practical guidance product, which is a lot like Thomson Reuters' practical law product. And both of those are products that started out as, sort of guides and checklists and forms and sort of tools to help a legal professional, mostly help lawyers for the most part, sort of practically know how to handle a particular kind of matter. If you're a young lawyer in a firm who's never done an M&A or something, it kind of walks you through. And this is kind of the first product I've seen that kind of overtly acknowledges that just those sort of forms and documents isn't enough. The data needs to be part of that practical knowledge. And it's the first product I've seen that really kind of incorporates data into that equation of a practical guidance product. So it'd be really interesting to see how that develops.
But I don't know what you think, Bob. So what I asked Daniel is, so it seems that there's a big overlap. So if you're an associate and you're drafting a contract, right? So this is not the product you're going to be using to do your actual drafting, right? So there seems to be quite a big overlap, and I think they're going to try and make it so that it's almost like two sides of the coin. So, but I suppose. I wonder if there's a risk of almost having too many things going on, because you're going to be having one part of Lexis where you're going to be drafting and pulling in all of your different. Is that right? Am I overthinking it? Do you think?
Well, no, I don't think you're overthinking it. I think that's a fair point, but I think it does tie into the drafting of it, because you'll be using the practical guidance product to be helping you find templated language or recommended language. And this lets you go in and actually go beyond what's in the product into the actual, SEC database and search on a much more granular level for relevant language. I mean, I don't know if they probably told you the same story, but I mean, the story they were telling me about it, which is also, what's also cool here is that the product manager for this product is Lindsay Bryn-Gardner, whose husband, John Bryn-Gardner, used to work at law.com and used to be my editor many years ago when I was part of their legal blog network. He kind of ran their legal blog network. So there's a little familiarity there. But she told a story about how she was talking to a lawyer. A lawyer was in a negotiation with another lawyer, and the other lawyer said, I would never agree to language like that. Yeah. And she was able to go back and actually find an instance in which that lawyer had agreed to language just like that by going into this product. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so annoying. So annoying. Just piss off. So bleep.
Yeah. But just I hate it when my husband does that to me.
Yeah. Look, and now there's proof. Just read
the effing contract.
Well, there's a tweet for everything. Like everything that comes out, there's a tweet from 4 or 5 years ago that contradicts it. So
exactly. This is now all evidence in at your fingertips.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. All right. Well, what else? Victor, you had a couple things. What's happening in your world this week?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I guess I'll just talk about the first one. There was this a story published, I guess just a couple of days ago, where they talked about how Google was giving out data from based on search keywords, and the case that precipitated that was, I guess one of R. Kelly's associates allegedly set committed arson against a one of the complainants against him. This is obviously all in court right now, and so but so it was interesting from that perspective. Just how they were able to kind of they used Google provided information about like very specific searches, like where does this person live? They looked at like what IP addresses like search for this person's address, and there were like various other like keywords that they were looking at. And so, I mean, obviously, this isn't the first time that they provided data for criminal cases and whatnot. But it just once again kind of shows that like you're like you're never really anonymous, like especially when you're using a utility like Google, where they track everything and everything's being can be traced and whatnot. And especially on a high profile case like this, involving a pretty like tangentially involved to a pretty high-profile case and a high-profile matter.
Yeah, it's pretty scary to think that Google is. I don't know how. Was this a subpoena, or did Google just kind of willingly turn this over to investigators?
I think there was a search warrant that was issued.
Oh, okay.
And so I mean, I think they're they've long maintained that their policy is to comply with lawful warrants. And obviously this is a case where, you could argue that it's the facts are such that it's hard to kind of justify not complying with it. Like, well, why wouldn't you comply with something like that? Right. But so what is it? Bad facts make bad law, good facts make good law. So sometimes, very often, it's just based on like what the reasoning is for on a given warrant. And in this case, I mean, it's kind of hard to argue against something like that. But I mean, you could see how this could easily be extrapolated into something where, maybe the information, would not be as forthcoming or would be better off not being so open.
Yeah. The serious invasion of privacy in some cases.
Yeah.
Joe, what about you this week?
And the only thing kind of technology adjacent that hit me, and it's not really a legal tech thing, but we can extrapolate it a little bit. was, speaking of Google, the Google Oracle arguments that the Supreme Court got an opportunity to hear reminded us yet again that the Supreme Court has absolutely zero concept of how to talk about technology. They have no facility for it, no understanding of it. The questions seemed out of left field. Nobody seemed to get what was happening and why these sorts of programs, how they work or why they should be protected or not. So it was one of those more terrifying times where, again, we have put aside the problems with the Supreme Court generally, but we have very serious technological questions that are now reaching this court. And it seems as though no one has the ability to deal with it. Honestly, the best thing that I took away from it was Breyer seemed to stumble into an analogy of how this all worked that made some degree of sense. The lawyers were like, actually, that's not bad. And that was the first time in the whole hearing that anyone seemed to speak any sense. But that was my takeaway, was that we have judges who continue to be tech illiterate, and that's a problem.
Why aren't I just, and this is my ignorance with the Supreme Court, I kind of was always under the impression that the clerks were supposed to be doing some of this work for helping the justices understand the context and the framework. So is that just not happening? Is that I'm dumbfounded that there aren't briefings on this from the clerks to the justices.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are. I don't want to cast aspersions on the great clerks of this country because there are several great ones. But I think, how do I put this delicately? We are seeing, at least with some justices, a bottom of the barrel scraping to find people who agree with them politically and not necessarily the sharpest tools in the law school shed. And that's going to be a problem. And it's also hard. I mean, I think all of us at this point, well, maybe not all of us. I think many of us have had the horrifying moment when a 8-year-old explains how something technological works that we don't understand. And it's hard for us to grasp. These clerks, even if they're doing their job, are showing Breyer how something happens, and he's going, yeah. Although, again, I shouldn't call him out. He seemed to be the only one who had a vague clue of what was happening. So, Alito, we'll throw him in there. But whoever it is just doesn't, even if it's being explained competently, there's no guarantee they're getting it.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, so I can see that whatever explanation they were given. It's a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought about this, to be honest with you, because there's going to be a period of time, isn't there, when this is going to happen. When, as you say, these sort of big, sort of crunchy tech cases are going to be coming before people that really have no experience, and even with expert evidence, probably find it really difficult to get to grips with. And how do they decide? I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, that's true at all levels of courts in all kinds of cases, right? I mean, that's true of, you get a complicated M&A case that goes before a judge who knows nothing about it.
I think that tech is quite specific.
Well, no, it is.
I think the M&A, it might have lots of parties, or it might have, lots of, but actually you can get your boards and you can show your share company A info. And actually, I think most judges who have been, they've obviously all been to law school and they do business and they understand. I think that you could get, most stuff with some time and explanation you could get to grips with, but tech seems to be one of those things.
No, it's true.
Even with lots of explanation, like you were saying, Joe, it's like that generational thing where their brains just go, and I've been guilty of that myself at times.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I don't know. I mean, different justices use their clerks in different manners, but and not having ever sat in on the Supreme Court hearing, I don't know if they're passing questions up to the justices and giving them input into what to ask and what to say and what to what to question the advocates on. So my feeling is that usually they're sort of doing research, drafting opinions. Maybe they summarize some of the cert memos for justices in some cases. So yeah, it could just be just like the function of how the court is, that these clerks are not are not as active in that one specific instance where, you have the live oral arguments going back and forth and whatnot. But I mean, that being said, I mean, it does also raise a lot of issues as to like, I think was it Justice Souter who like refused to ever use a computer? He always used his typewriter up until the day he retired. And there are other justices who have been known to like, they would write everything out by hand, or they would do this and do that. And a few years ago, I think that there was an oral argument about video games, and like, one of the originalists on the court was trying to figure out like how this squares with, an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. It's just like, well, video games, you can obviously use it. You can cover it, with original intent, the way you cover all kinds of emerging technology, or you could treat it as something unprecedented. So it's just it's interesting that these very important issues are being decided, being interpreted by people who might not have the best understanding of technology. So I don't really know what hopefully having to rely on technology more these last couple of months, maybe that'll jog some greater understanding going forward. I mean we can hope, but
Horace Wu says, isn't it the lawyer's job to explain the tech better to the judges? Yeah, I guess it is.
And
That's part of it.
It is, but there's also some level of a need for a lingua franca. Actually, frankly, that's actually in a lot of ways what this case is even about. It's about the kind of code that takes the coding that somebody else has done and makes it something that something else understands. That bridge gapping, and lawyers can come up with as many good explanations as possible. But I mean, different ideas are going to resonate with different people, and there's some level of expertise you need to have even to understand the analogy in the first place. Right? There was in this instance where the thing that finally resonated was Breyer saying, "Isn't this kind of like somebody patenting the QWERTY keyboard?" Like saying, "Oh no, no one else can have the keys oriented that way." Like at a certain point, there's just a way it has to happen, and that was the first thing that seemed to dislodge in people's brains that this made.
Yeah. I did argue it in an Above the Law column. I just posted the link to a year ago that maybe there should be a duty of technology competence for judges, just like there is for lawyers. Many states have codes of judicial conduct, but that's not part of any code of judicial conduct that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Or the federal circuit be the final word on certain of these cases. Those folks know what they're doing.
Well, Dan O'Day says, even if you have a great understanding of tech, the law is unclear. Better to pass a clear law on the topic.
Yeah, but then you have the same problem with Congress. Like some of these people don't understand. They don't even know like what's the difference between different like Twitter and Facebook. They're asking Mark Zuckerberg questions about tweets, and it's like, if you can't even do your basic homework as to who's CEO of what, then
All right, we are just about out of time here, and I want to bring it to a close. Any last words of wisdom or final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Well, Joe gets the last word, right?
That was once. I did my one. Other people get last word now.
All right. Well, we will leave it at that. That was that. And
then I did. See,
and you did. Yep, you did. And thanks everybody for attending and listening. And we will be back next Friday at 3:00 Eastern, noon Pacific, whatever time it is, wherever you are, with another episode of the show. So look for it then. Thanks to everybody for participating.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.